we are following the aftermath of a deadly Russian missile strike on an apartment complex in the southeastern city of Dnipro. Rescue teams were frantically looking for survivors following Saturday's attack. The regional governor says 29 people have been killed and dozens are still missing. The city's mayor says there is little chance of finding anyone else alive. CBC's foreign correspondent Chris Brown is at the scene of the attack. Chris, describe what is around you.
It's extremely grim, Natasha. This is a huge building. It would have been full of families and people enjoying their weekend when that missile hit just over 24 hours ago. Ukrainian leaders say at least 70 units, 70 flats were obliterated, and there's that great big hole in the middle, and some 240 other flats were also damaged as well. And as we've been here over the last hour or so, we can see the flashlights of all the different workers going through all these damaged houses, all these damaged homes, trying to see if there's anybody left inside. The most recent numbers that we got were about 44 people missing. Now, I can tell you if they're anywhere in that middle area that's collapsed, sadly they've perished, but clearly the fact that they've still been going through all day and all night and still looking indicates that they still have some hope of finding people. But as you say, city officials, certainly when they gave a briefing earlier, were not sounding positive at all. The Ukrainian Defense Ministry announced that what they believe this was a missile that was fired from a Russian heavy bomber. It was a missile that was actually designed to sink NATO large ships, such as aircraft carriers. But the Russians have reconfigured it and have instead been using it to attack targets on the land, especially civilian targets. And it's just a huge one-ton warhead, and it really leveled this building.
Just a shocking scene, and you're right in front of it. So that's the central story that we're getting out of Ukraine today, this building being hit. What are the people in the area telling you, Chris?
Well, we got remarkable access just a little while ago to the hospital. We were led into the intensive care ward, and some of the people who survived this and are in really rough shape told us their stories. I mean, as I say, they were just enjoying their weekend when suddenly everything just shattered. Glass came in. One man we talked to, you wouldn't believe how many cuts and bruises. His face was totally messed up, blood everywhere. And, he's just glad to be alive. His wife survived. And he said he wanted to talk to us because he felt it was important for people all around the world to see what is happening to Ukraine. And he actually, even as he was in so much pain, he even said thank you to Canada for all the support that Canadians have been giving Ukrainians. So it was quite a powerful moment in the ICU for sure.
Chris, before I let you go, let me ask you this. This is a residential building. This is not a military complex in any capacity. Those people who have lost their homes and don't have a hospital bed to sleep in, where are they going to sleep tonight?
There's actually just around us here, you can't see it, it's off camera, there's a whole bunch of tents. It's quite almost a pop-up kind of mini community that's, I think, what they're doing is trying to find help for everyone, trying to make sure that people who have lost their homes have somewhere to go. Sadly, Ukrainians are getting pretty good at this. They've been doing this now for the last 11 months, helping one another, trying to find places for people to sleep. And my sense is that anyone who needs a bed tonight is going to be taken care of. But it's just been an awful weekend here.
Okay, CBC foreign correspondent Chris Brown in Dnipro, Ukraine. Thank you, Chris. Well, for more on this story, we have reached Michael Bosserque, who is in Odessa, Ukraine. He is a global affairs analyst and a senior fellow with the Atlantic Council. Michael, good to speak with you. It's been a few weeks since we've spoken.
Mm-hmm. Correct. Yes, it has. Yeah.
Well, let me begin before we get to the bigger stories of the day. You're in Odessa. We know that a number of cities have been targeted this weekend by the Russians. How are the folks in Odessa faring?
Yeah, Natasha. So Odessa was one of the many cities hit by the most recent wave of missile strikes. Critical infrastructure was hit. But, even if the missiles don't hit Odessa, we have a shared energy power distribution system here in Ukraine. So damage in one area of Ukraine will affect other places here. But yeah, it's so sad because just 2 days ago, people were rejoicing in streetlights because they came back and people could walk normally along the streets here. And now the streets are pretty much back in darkness again because of the missile strikes. And it's tough. It's very tough for small and medium-sized businesses. Bakeries, for example, I noticed today that some bakeries couldn't even bake bread because they need electricity for that. So day-to-day life is very disruptive. And you can see in that intersection, there's no functioning traffic lights, making it very dangerous for both car drivers and passengers.
What's the sense you're getting on the ground, Michael? Because, for months, the story has been, look at the power of the Ukrainian military. Look at their resilience. They've been pushing the Russians back and back and back. But really, since New Year's weekend, we've seen the Russian assault be so intense. We saw that barrage of bombardment on New Year's weekend. We've seen them take Soledar. While it's not particularly significant for the Ukrainians, it's hugely symbolic for the Russians to gain that city. And now today, with the leveling of all of these communities and a residential property, are we seeing that tug of war and Russia now back again on top?
Well, sadly, at the end of the day, what we're seeing when we thought we saw the basement of Russian inhumanity, they go ahead and surprise us. In fact, just before I came on air with you, I was checking the Ukrainian telegram channels, and in Kherson, which was, of course, taken back by the Ukrainians, the Russians have struck an office where the Red Cross operates. Now, this is supposed to be a no-go zone for everybody, but they struck that. The strike on the Dnipro residential complex, not only did it shake Ukrainians to the core, there's absolutely horror both here in Ukraine as well as Ukrainians overseas. But what is very worrisome, Natasha, with that particular strike, aside from what Chris said, the size of the weapon, is apparently it took a trajectory where the air defense systems or the air raid alarms couldn't detect it. Now, that's very scary. And by the way, it was the same type of missile, I'm told, that struck that shopping center in Kiev near the beginning of the war. So, Ukraine is getting these air defense systems. It's going to get that system that Canada is buying from the U.S. as well, which is a very welcome development. But it almost seems like the Russians are surprising everybody at every corner, at every turn, and using these new tactics. We didn't expect for a few months ago those Iranian drones to come onto the scene, but that's what's happening. On the battlefield, quickly, Ukrainians are doing an amazing job, as you said. I think Soledar is still not decided who is actually in control. But the difference between the Ukrainians and the Russians is the Russians are throwing wave after wave of men towards the front line. And hundreds and hundreds are dying apparently every day. So it's just a horrible scene.
Let's talk about the support that the Ukrainians continue to get from the Western world. So the British government has agreed to send over these heavy Challenger tanks. Mm-hmm. What kind of support would that offer that wasn't previously there? How significant is this to the war effort?
Well, there are two things here. One is on the military and the other is on the diplomatic side. So on the military side, this is an incredible fighting machine. It's a post-Cold War fourth generation tank, 70 tons. It has fire and thermal control systems. So it's almost invincible on the battlefield. It will bring the Ukrainians closer to the front line and be able to strike with a heck of a lot more precision and also defend themselves better. Now, on the diplomatic side, despite the political changes in the United Kingdom, the one thing they did get right was the Ukraine response from the beginning. So now with this decision to send these tanks, and it's not an easy feat, they are heavy, it'll take a lot of logistics, but also it sends a diplomatic message to European countries. Now is the time to grow some spine, give Ukraine more muscle in the form of tanks and fighting vehicles. So the hope there is that European countries, for example, Poland, will be able to send those German Leopard tanks as well to Ukraine, because 12 is a big number, of course, for these Challenger 2 tanks, but they need dozens, hundreds of tanks to really make a difference on the battlefield. So hopefully, again, this will persuade European countries to go ahead, especially Germany, to give Ukraine those vital fighting tanks.
Well, even on that front, you mentioned Poland. Poland has said it would have to negotiate with Germany to send over their tanks. And Germany has said even if we were going to send the tanks, they won't be ready to send over until 2024, meaning a whole year at least before Ukraine would receive them. In between now and then, does Ukraine have what it needs to maintain its borders?
No, it doesn't. And the Ukrainian officials make that clear, is this is exactly what they need, along with the air defense systems to repel those incoming Russian missiles. I think if it hasn't got through the heads of Western leaders that they have to act now, actually they should have acted earlier. I don't know what will, because this war is spilling over Ukraine's borders. Just yesterday, missile fragments were found nearby over the border in Moldova. Rocket fragments have fallen in Poland. On top of that, of course, you have Putin's weaponization of migration, energy, food, and now winter. So all of Europe is affected. That strike on Dnipro will probably send more asylum seekers into neighboring countries, putting more pressure on systems there. So they have to act quickly. Otherwise, this is going to become much, much more their problem as well.
Okay, Michael Bosserkue in Odessa, Ukraine. Thank you so much for your time.
My pleasure.